Hey, Alicia Nova here, and today I wanted to give you 4 tips on how to build rugged software. So rugged software is about building software that is resilient, it's secure, and defensible in today's world. So here we go. So before getting started, there are 2 important principles behind building rugged software that I want to call out. The first is that your software is probably going to get used for a lot longer than you intended and in ways that you never even planned for. And the second is that your software is probably going to get attacked by users that are maybe malicious or they just want to troll. They could be mature in terms of their hacking skills or immature. And so while there are a lot of other principles behind rugged software, keeping those 2 in mind, here are 4 tips on how to build better and more rugged software. So the minimum viable product is an agile principle. However, it's really helpful when you're thinking about building rugged software as well. If you think about your software as a building, the more that your software can do in terms of its features and functionalities, the more you're creating entry points to that building. And over time, if it's not getting constant maintenance, it'll suffer from neglect, which means that it'll be easier for people to get into that building. And over time as well, those areas become just naturally harder and harder to maintain, and your technical debt starts to increase. So when you think about your MVP, you want to make sure that the features that you add on always align to that initial vision. There's this joke about Excel, which is that people will find ways to use Excel in really interesting ways that have nothing to do with spreadsheets and data. And the same thing goes with PowerPoint, where people get really creative with what they do with it, and it never really has to do with actually doing a presentation. Now, setting aside the fact that that's a great opportunity to dissect and come up with a new novel product that addresses that need that people have, I think you'll find that the general thing is that people will take tools, software tools, and shape them around their own needs. They don't always use software the way it was intended. And the same thing goes with actual physical tools. How often have you seen someone use a screwdriver or a wrench or the bottom of their drill as a hammer? And that will work sometimes, but it's never quite as good as an actual hammer. Now, rugged principles are all about recognizing this fact. You'll notice that Excel and PowerPoint, they let the user do what they want to do. There's nothing there to constrain them. There's no clip art, paperclip guide that jumps out that says, hey, I see that you're trying to do this, and that's not how Excel gets used. At least you don't get that anymore. Now, remember, with the MVP, it's all about focusing the scope of your application, but your users will always try to find ways to broaden and expand that scope, and they'll do it in ways that you can't predict. And so the rugged principles are all around figuring out ways to cover those bases. You can't cover them by handling them with different features, but what you can do is not skimp on things like logging and monitoring, and a way of building out a forensic set of tools that when something inevitably goes wrong, you'll be able to trace the steps back to figure out what went wrong and then handle it. And not handle it by building out features for those users, but handle it in a way where when they go down that path, the application still functions the way that you intended. If you don't know what the OWASP top 10 are, you definitely should go Google them. In short, it's a top 10 list of the security risks for any web application. Now, you should know what each of them are, and whenever you're building a new application or building out a feature of an existing application, you want to think through that list and get a sense of what kind of risk you're exposed to for each of those. Security is not particularly an exciting topic for a lot of people. It can be kind of boring for some. But at the same time, especially around these lists, if you don't account for them, and if you don't plan for them, it becomes very easy for a malicious user to exploit and take advantage of your application. So go out there. It's very easy to find free training courses, and if you just spend a little bit of time in that, it'll spare you a ton of grief. It's easy to look at a solution and immediately think, oh, we don't need to spend money on that. We could build it ourselves and it won't be that hard. And while software developers do have a bad reputation of providing inaccurate estimates, when it comes to building new software, we're not that bad. Where we get tripped up is factoring in the time and the cost towards the maintenance of that software. So if that software is not a core part of our product, if it's not part of that MVP, what that means is that it'll be really hard to continuously devote resources towards maintaining that software. And over time, that software becomes technical debt, and it weighs you down and it slows you down. And just like what I said in the first step, it becomes another entry point towards our software building, and it makes us more vulnerable. So when you consider buying versus building, the nice part about buying software is that you're offloading that risk towards someone that is dedicated to maintaining that software because you're paying them for it. Now, that doesn't come without its own set of risks. It is sometimes risky to integrate with a third-party tool, but when you actually have a dollar figure attached to it, and you can compare it to the cost of you having to do it internally, including the maintenance cost of that, you can better assess what the right decision is. But the nice part about offloading it is that you have a partner there that is vested in keeping that part stable, secure, and addressing the needs that you as their customers have. So those are 4 important considerations when building rugged software. I hope you found that helpful. And in addition to these kind of little segments that I do, I also run a podcast called Increments. And you can check it out at increments.dev or on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Increments is all about creating space for us as software developers to really think more intentionally about our growth and how we want to drive our career paths. I hope you'll check it out, increments.dev, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.